Hey, I'm Steve Brachtenbach, and this is my story in his story. So I grew up in a house without a spiritual framework. We weren't atheists. We didn't disbelieve in God or hate God. We weren't cultural Christians. We didn't go to church at all. Right? There wasn't a Bible in the house. There was no spiritual talk whatsoever. Even on holidays, we weren't going to church unless we were visiting extended family out of town. And with that came no moral framework either. So I remember as a kid, teachers or even classmates telling me like, "Hey, you shouldn't cuss, you shouldn't do these things," and just thinking, why? Like, who's to say? There was just no source of truth there, and getting confused and cussing and then stopping and then doing it and then not doing it, and just having that confusion that I was trying to work through. And it was in this context that my family started to have issues too. So we moved to a new state, and basically, my dad didn't show up. He left the family, and my dad ended up getting remarried and divorced several times after that. My mom ended up remarrying and divorcing, and we ended up in a place where we just felt very isolated. Right, we were in a different state, away from family. Um, there was no truth, and we felt alone. And in this context, we had these neighbors that kept inviting us to church. And my mom would say, "No thanks, no thanks. We've already tried that before, it didn't work." But eventually things got difficult enough within the family that my mom said, "Yes, like we need a change. We need some sort of community around us so we don't feel alone anymore." So we started going to church with our neighbors. And I just saw the faithfulness of God. He started coming in at these different touch points in my life personally. So I was a big reader. I loved novels as a kid. I still love novels now. And I remember being around 10 and at Walmart with my mom. She was shopping for groceries. And I wandered over to the book aisle to look for my next book. And I picked this book up off the shelf. And I remember just thinking, I don't know what this is. I didn't understand kind of the synopsis on the back, but I felt like this was the book for me. This is what I was going to take home. My mom didn't know what it was, so I got home and started reading, and it turns out that this is the Left Behind series for kids, right? And that was like one of my first touch points into the gospel and into understanding who God was, and it confused me because I was thinking, is this fiction, or are they trying to say like this is really going to happen? And as I started to explore that, I could ask my pastor, my new pastor at church that I started going to, I could go to the Bible, and I started reading it. And I had never even really seen a Bible before. So I picked it up and it was all new. So I read it as a 10-year-old, kind of cover to cover, and just trying to understand, who is Jesus and what does this mean? And through the faithfulness of our neighbors and members of church and the pastor of the church that sat down and explained this to us, I saw uh, that I was a sinner and I was separated from God, and I could see the effects of that sin in my family life as it kind of got worse and worse over the years. But that in that, God offered me salvation by sending his son Jesus to die on the cross, right, in the midst of my sin, and forgive that sin and allow me to be reconciled with God, with my loving Father and Creator. So through that, my family and I, my mom, my sister, and I decided to place our faith in Christ, really all at the same time, which was a huge blessing, and just dedicated our lives to Jesus. And from there, I just saw my life start to change. And there were other just touch points that Jesus had in my life through the faithfulness of God. Other books that I was reading, so The Lord of the Rings, The Chronicles of Narnia. I didn't know when I picked those up that Tolkien and Lewis were actually Christian authors, and that there were Christian themes and symbolism through these books. And as I started to realize that and explore those themes in the Bible, I got this vision in my life for just using Christ in everyday life, right? So I saw these authors that were using Jesus in their vocations, their secular vocations, and I realized that, hey, Christianity was not something to confine to Sunday mornings or to maybe like a once a quarter service project. Instead, I should be living my life out and worshiping God every day in everything I do, right? And that led to today, where I live in Seattle and I work for a very secular tech company. But within that job, I'm able to stand out as a light for Christ. I'm able to love my colleagues, to stand for truth, and just to be one of those touch points in their life, right? So as they start to seek God, when God speaks into their heart, I'm one of the few places in a very secular, anti-Christian part of the country where they can turn and just learn truth, where they can ask questions and learn about Jesus. And for the first time, many of our neighbors are being invited to church. So I get to kind of play out that faithfulness. I get the privilege to be a part of that same blessing in their life that I experienced years ago when my neighbors were inviting me to church.